So joining me now to break it down is Senior Fellow at the Heritage Foundation and author of the upcoming book, The Plot to Change America, How Identity Politics is Dividing the Land of the Free, Mike Gonzalez. Mike, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Sarah, it's such a joy to be with you. Thank you very much for having me on to discuss.
You're so welcome. Well, I got to tell you, it's hard to know where to start with this platform because the notion of this, and let's take first the name, the 1619 date is originating here from the year in which African slaves were first brought to the English colonies in North America. So really what it does is it pits 1619 against 1776, what many of us would consider the birthday for America. So that's where the platform starts. It has now been neatly packaged into a curriculum that is going to be shipped out to public classrooms, ready for indoctrination to a public school near you. But of all of the criticisms that I've seen and read on this platform, Mike, what is your biggest problem with the project?
Well, Edmund Burke, who was, the person who invented modern conservatism, said that in order to love your country had to be lovely. And what this project does with this curriculum, my main beef is the fact that it's a curriculum. I really don't care what readers of the New York Times, the people who line up to buy the New York Times, that's more, whatever. It's a private company, they're private citizens, we have freedom of speech. My main beef is that this is a curriculum that is being taught to students, to young minds, to get them from very early on to think of America as hideous, to see America as a place whose true birth was the day that we began slavery, it's not 1776, not the ideals of 1776, the ideals which the author of the 1619 Project, Nikole Hannah-Jones, says were false. Let's not quibble with the fact that ideals cannot be false, right? They can be bad or good. Right. Ideals can never be false. But the thing is, let's take the main two ideals, right? That all men are created equal, and that we're all equal under God, and that we have, we have the right to rule ourselves. That is what got us out of slavery. That is these ideals, the ideals of the Declaration, the ideals of the Constitution, is what got this country out of slavery. That all men are created equal, that we're endowed by creators with inalienable rights. So to pretend that the stain of slavery, which it was a stain, and nobody is denying that slavery was tragic for everybody, but especially for the slaves themselves. Nobody pretends that we should learn about slavery. We should also learn that it was our ideals that got us out of slavery. We're endowed by creators with inalienable rights, and we're all equal under the law. When we finally said, okay, we're going to fight a war to make sure that these ideals apply to everybody, and then we had the civil rights movement to make sure that we got rid of segregation as well. So, and don't forget, when Martin Luther King goes to the mall in 1963, he says, I come here to cash a check. That check was these ideals. He believed in the ideals. To teach our children that these ideals were false, that something else as the project pretends, that the Revolutionary War was fought to protect slavery because England was going to get rid of slavery, that is a falsehood that the New York Times has since had to retract.
Yes. And yet, still won a Pulitzer. So you can give an award to anyone for anything, apparently. I've got to tell you, Mike, you come to this with such a personal knowledge of why it will boost socialist teaching, because what it really does is take that notion of American exceptionalism. And we hear a lot about this now because the entirety of the Trump campaign was a slogan of Make America Great Again. That was sort of the linchpin. It's how we understood he was going to run his campaign. And there is an underpinning of American exceptionalism in that. But exceptionalism in America is now sort of a type of modern philosophical heresy, isn't it? This is the notion of, well, our nation is not worth celebrating as being unique and beautiful and strong.
And that is right. And that is, why are we exceptional? We're exceptional not because we're better, although I believe that we're better, but that is not what exceptionalism claims. Exceptionalism claims that we're the only country on earth that derives its legitimacy from natural right. Natural right has the same thing as human rights. Natural rights are very few. We have the right to liberty, the right to freedom of speech, the right to free conscience, in other words, choose our religion, the right to property. All these things are individual rights, that is what exceptionalism means. What identity politics does, and this 1619 project and now a curriculum, is that it takes us away from that exceptionalism, that idea that it is individuals that are endowed by their creator with these rights, and speaks of collectivism, and collective and group rights. So when Nikole Hannah-Jones says, as she did last year in an interview, that she thinks that communist Cuba produces the greatest racial equity, and it's because communist Cuba is socialist. She says the reason is because of socialism. So she believes that socialism is the best pathway to racial equity. First of all, anybody who knows anything about Cuba understands that is not the case. Right. A country that is majority black or mixed race today is run by a very small white minority, actually a family. So that is untrue. But let's not go down that rabbit hole. Socialism will not produce the best, the best path forward to racial equity. Obviously, individual right is treating people as individuals, not as members of collectives.
It's interesting because you mentioned this in your article as well, her reference to Cuba as being the penultimate example of sort of an equal relationship, an equality-based governance model, which for those of us who are old enough to know better, and we've talked about this in a different context, Mike, how there's this strange appeal of socialism as a notion that is a viable political option or a system of governance when in fact it is anything but. And socialist economies have failed worldwide, except for the Netherlands, which, if you want to get very finite about it, its economy is really more free market than a true socialist environment. So we'll leave that.
Take private property. Right?
Absolutely. So we'll leave that aside for the moment. But socialism universally fails. We have textbooks full of history that demonstrates it. And yet what this platform does, because it's already been instituted in 4,500 classrooms in just a few months. And as the parent of 3 school-age children, this is where I take the largest umbrage. I am very upset about the fact that not only is it the notion that the character of America is irredeemable, that the nation itself, the founding was so ugly that there can be nothing redeemable about the democratic system of governance, but it's historically accurate, and it is based on a notion of a governance system that fails. So it is more problematic, I think, than anyone reading the New York Times and seeing a Pulitzer Prize winning essay would automatically understand, unless they did a little homework like you have in this piece.
Yeah. So again, it's not the fact that it's a series of articles. It's the fact that it's a curriculum, right? And the fact that it's now being taught to tens of thousands of students.
Yes.
That it is in 4,500 classrooms, that it has been it's the school systems of Buffalo, Chicago, Washington, Wilmington, in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, have all adopted the project on a broad scale. That is very worrisome.
Yes.
And, in this idea, so identity politics is tight at the hip with socialism, I believe. Yes. One of the reasons I titled my book "The Plot to Change America" is because I came to the conclusion that what it was subterfuge, was a pathway to introduce central planning in this country. Because if you say, as you said just now, if you believe that the country is irredeemably racist, that the country is structurally racist, that it is institutionally racist, so you have to replace the institutions, you have to replace the structures. And there are alternatives, and not the ideals that we have of individuals being able to govern themselves and their families, and governments being instituted to protect their freedoms. No, their ideals is really more central planning. Is we're going to have a collectivist, group-based approach, not individual-based approach, and we're going to have the government as the arbiter of when groups have disagreements, the governmental arbiter disagreements, is everything that is foreign to the American mind and to the American tradition, to the American ideals.
I find it interesting also, we're talking about socialism, and we're talking about how this is really designed to boost the notion, the acceptability, the prevalence of socialism in young minds in America. And even the World Socialist website has critiqued the actual 1619 project. They have said, they've offered blistering rejoinders, a racialist falsification of America and history. So even the socialists say, no, this is wrong in so many ways. But my concern, again, as it is yours, it's being packaged and platformed. Now with a Pulitzer attached, it's being sold to schools nationwide. 4,500 schools have already implemented. Do we have a sense of how rapidly this is spreading, how quickly a platform like this, a curricula like this, will be instituted?
Well, in January, the classrooms was in 3,500 classrooms. So it has added 1,000 classrooms in the space of 3 months. But let me tell you why the socialists have attacked this project. The socialists, the online socialists, are believe in economic classes. In other words, they're colorblind. They believe that the working class was going to rise up and overthrow the landlords and the bourgeoisie, and that it was going to be a colorblind eruption of revolution. The cultural Marxists, the people of identity politics, have given up on that idea. Okay, so they believe in identities based on race, ethnicity, sex, sexual orientation, gender, even disability status, not economic classes. So that is you have to understand this big fight at the heart of the Marxists in America today and of the world. Some of them are economic Marxists. They believe that somebody like Oprah Winfrey, for example, is no different from a wealthy woman of any color, right? It's money and social class that matters to the old-line socialists. To the cultural Marxists, everything is down to immutable traits like race, gender, race, sex, ethnicity, and so forth.